plants on the planet die because they are not able to sustain photosynthesis. I think it's actually 2 months. And so the same sort of thing would happen on Mars. Because these dust storms are very routine, any attempt to establish plant life or to maintain a Mars base using solar energy would be doomed to failure. For the reason that these dust storms cover up the entirety of the planet, a total blackout, and prevent any sunlight from reaching our energy systems or our oxygen systems, the plant life that we have. And similarly, because Mars is a smaller planet than Earth, it has less gravity. And this has permanent implications not only for human reproduction, but also for bone decalcification, loss of muscle tone, some of the things that astronauts usually experience in zero gravity. But it's a lot more permanent on Mars. Every 780 days, we have a launch window for Mars. That means every 780 days, the Earth comes close enough to Mars that we can launch a mission there, and it takes, I think, about 6 months to get to Mars. The key advocate is named Robert Zubrin. He has these just fantastic cards that he writes about why we need to go to Mars. And I'll read a few of those for you here in a moment. He was the founder of the Mars Society, and he's the founder of the program Mars Direct. And really believes that we should get people on Mars. One of our solvency cards in the 1AC says that we can be on Mars in 4 years. We have people on Mars in 4 years if we would just have 20% of NASA's operating budget devoted to getting people on that planet. Okay, terraforming, you can write that word down, it's an important term. Who knows what terraforming means?
Free country gases into the atmosphere so you can change it so you don't enter.
Terraforming is when we form terra, or form Earth, or form a planet into something that's habitable. One avenue for doing that, as Max just identified, is to change the atmosphere. So that it will include, we can change its temperature so that it's more hospitable to humans, that it can contain oxygen, etc. Now this is largely theoretical, but you know, like global warming happens here on Earth, the same thing could happen to Mars. We could intentionally do it. And there are resources from both on Mars, such as the polar ice caps, and nearby asteroids and planets and things like that, I mean microplanets that are in the asteroid belt, that we can use in order to change the atmosphere of Mars. Venus is closer and has a more similar gravity to Earth, but it's 1,000 degrees, has way too high of atmospheric pressure, no oxygen or water, and no celestial bodies that are close enough to it. It has no asteroid belt that's close enough for us to transfer resources to change the atmospheric composition. We got 2 landers onto Mars that only survived for about 2 minutes, and then were crushed by the atmospheric pressure. So you can easily see how Venus is just not a habitable place. No one seriously thinks that we can colonize Venus at this point. So why would we want to colonize Mars? What are the advantages to colonizing Mars? So Mars, because it's 6 months away, is not economically viable as a strategy for resource extraction. And we don't really know of that many resources that are on Mars that we absolutely need here on Earth, such that it would be worth it to go there. It's not like an Avatar where there's this random mineral called unobtainium that we went to go conquer indigenous species in order to get, which I thought was also the stupidest part of Avatar. If you're going to have some unobtainable element, calling it unobtainium is just really, I didn't think it was either funny or ingenuitive. They could have called it something like, yeah, whatever. Okay, so the Earth is doomed is reason number 1 that we should colonize Mars. We have messed up this planet. It's over. We missed our shot. So we have to get out into space, either through space habitats, which are just like floating space stations. If you Google space habitats, you'll see all kinds of images for what artists have rendered as their imaginary space stations. Some of them are big circular discs. We could either blow ourselves up, we could get hit by an asteroid, global warming, environmental destruction, overpopulation, resource extraction. All of these things are happening, and so people are like, if humans are going to survive the species, we've already missed our shot on this planet. There are good cards that say that humanity will be extinct within 50 years, even without a nuclear war or an asteroid collision. A lot of environmental experts say that the damage that we've done to Earth is irreversible. Some of the climate authors insist that we've set in motion a series of feedback loops, that once the Earth starts warming, all of the buried forests that are frozen in the ice cap, once those start to melt, they'll release a whole bunch of carbon dioxide too. And this will pump a whole bunch more carbon dioxide, and it will cause the Earth to warm up even more. It's called a feedback loop. And so we've already put all the things in motion so that the Earth will go extinct. Even if we were to stop pumping CO2 right now into the atmosphere, it's just too late. And so there's no going back cards are a dime a dozen, and they're also really, really good from a lot of environmental experts. And so the argument is that the window is closing for getting onto Mars. And the conclusion that Zubrin reaches, he's that key advocate again, is that because it'll take us about 50 years to actually get a workable colony up on Mars, and because we're only going to last for about 50 years, we have now, right now, in order to actually put the mechanics into place to get off the rock, as we call it. The second reason, which I was talking about before, is the overview effect. When we get up into space and look back on the planet and see how special we are. And there are kind of three subcomponents of this kumbaya argument that we'll all be happy. The first is that when we look back on the planet and see that we're all one species, that we'll get over our differences. But we'll still respect each other's differences, you know, like some of us have more hair than others. But we'll be able to live in peace towards a common human purpose. Also, we'll understand how valuable our resources are. Once we realize that we have really messed up on Earth and there's no going back, we won't have the same mentality of overconsumption or destruction of the planet as we did back on Earth. And it'll actually cause us to start treating the environment on Earth more respectfully when we're off of it. And also there's the notion that the Earth is just a tiny blue dot in the universe and causes us to question our existence, etc. And so the thesis of all these things, which is really interesting, I believe, is that this is one of the advantages that you do not need to solve for getting a colony on Mars in the next 50 years or 200 years. This is something that happens immediately. It's a critical advantage, a discursive framework, ethical kind of advantage that happens immediately in your advocacy to get off the rock. You are inculcating and reinvigorating your advocacy in public debate with a spirit as such that you realize that the planet Earth is special, that humans are special, that we're motivated and guided by common currents of energy or what have you, and that we should all sing Kumbaya together. That violence should stop because we are one species. We are all similar in certain respects. And so this advantage happens immediately. You don't have to win the solvency, per se, for getting to Mars in order to win these advantages. They happen back on Earth retrospectively and improve the human condition here on Earth, regardless of whether or not 200 years from now we'll have workable colonies. Got a question? Yeah.
Why hasn't this happened yet if we've already taken pictures of the Earth?
Okay, good question. There are several answers to this. The first is just a picture from the moon. His question, if you didn't hear him, is why didn't this happen? We have a picture of the Earth, right? And so answers to this abound. A lot of people have re-theorized how it works. One of the arguments is that it just doesn't work until we actually get people up there. It's the astronauts who went through this psychological revolution, not just the individuals. In the critique round, it's about how your performance inaugurates the same kind of ethic that those astronauts experience. It's how in this debate, discursively, we inaugurate a thinking as a species mentality. Similarly, once we put people on Mars, I mean, if you want to be in a policy framework as well, once we get to Mars, everyone will have had to leave Earth, and we'll have had to experience this overview effect of looking back on Earth. And so, once we start sending people to Mars en masse, is when this overview effect takes place. There's a bunch of other nuanced arguments to it as well, but I mean that's the gist of it. I saw some other hands going up. That's the overview effect. Yeah.
So is that assuming that we send everyone to Mars, like everyone on Earth wouldn't be affected?
No, just like, I forget what some of the figures are, I think 1,000 people is necessary to self-sustain the human population.
Okay.
Something like 1,000. But everyone that goes there is going to have this cognitive transformation take place. And the type of future society that we build on Mars will be one in which we look back on Earth with sad, nostalgic eyes, and we remember the lessons that we learned destroying our own planet.
So the impact needs to be like that we won't make the same mistake that we did on Earth.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things. Yeah. Okay. The next major argument, this is one that Zubrin makes, is that we need a new conceptual frontier, or a conceptual horizon. In order to have progress, we need to have something that we're aiming towards. The fact that there's no more American frontier, or that there's nowhere else on the world that has yet to be discovered, as many people say. The last tribe that had never experienced contact was sometime in like the 20s, I think. And so the whole world is unified. Everyone's met everybody. We have satellite images of the entire world. There's nothing left to be discovered. There's nothing left to strive for. And so there's not a reason that we would do anything here on Earth to improve our condition or to make giant leaps and bounds in human imagination, etc. According to Gottbreht and other similar advocates, Mars would provide another conceptual frontier, a goal for civilization to advance towards. And this would transform our attitudes on Earth and lead to technological progress and new egalitarian democratic societies and all that stuff. Here's some examples of cards. Here's a good overview of that card by Isaac Asimov, who's one of the most famous science fiction authors and astrophysicists in the world. He's on par with Stephen Hawking. He says, if we really expanded into space with all our might and made it a global project, this would be the equivalent of winning the West. I think that although we as nations will remain our suspicious and mutual hatred, we will find it our advantage to cooperate in developing space. In doing so, we'll be able to adopt a globalist view of our situation, the internal strife between Earthlings, the little quarrels over this or that patch of Earth, and the magnified memories of past injustices will diminish. Before the much greater task of developing a new, much larger world, the development of space is the great positive project that will force cooperation and a new outlook that may bring peace to Earth, and a kind of the entire world would act as a unit on matters that affect the entire world. Only in such a way will we be able to survive and to avoid the kinds of wars that will either gradually destroy our civilization or develop into a war that will suddenly destroy it. There are so many benefits to be derived from space exploration and exploitation. Why not take what seems to me to be the only chance of escaping what is otherwise the sure destruction of all that humanity has struggled to achieve for 50,000 years? That's pretty good card, I think. Here's an example of the frontier stuff that Gottbreht throws around, a lot of people have talked about. He says in 1890 the American frontier was declared closed. What if the frontier is gone? What happens to America and all it stood for? In a free, egalitarian, democratic, innovating society with a can-do spirit we preserve in the absence of room to grow? We see around us an ever more apparent loss of vigor of American society, increasing fixity of power structure and bureaucratization of all levels of society, impotence of political institutions to carry out great projects, the cancerous proliferation of regulations affecting all aspects of the public, private, and commercial life, the spread of irrationalism, the banalization of popular culture, the loss of willingness by individuals to take risks, to fend for themselves, or to think for themselves, economic stagnation, decline, the deceleration of the rate of technological innovation, the loss of belief in the idea of progress itself. Everywhere you look, the writing is on the wall. Without a frontier from which to breathe life, the spirit that gave rise to the progressive humanistic culture that America has offered to the world for the past several centuries is fading. The issue is not just one of national loss. Human progress needs a vanguard, and no replacement is in sight. The creation of a new frontier that presents itself as America and humanity's greatest social need. Nothing is more important. Apply what allies as you will. Without a frontier to grow in, not only American society, but the entire global civilization, based on Western Enlightenment values of humanism, reason, science, and progress, will die. Here's another example, Gottbreht. There are greater threats than a humanist society faces in a closed world than the return of oligarchy, and if the frontier remains closed, we are certain to face them in the 21st century. These threats are the spread of various sorts of anti-human ideologies and the development of political institutions that incorporate the notions that strengthen them in the face of operation. At the top of the list, such pathological ideas spread naturally in the closed society is that of Malthus. In a closed society, Malthusianism has the appearance of self-evident truth, and herein lies the danger. It is not enough to argue against Malthusianism in the abstract. Such debates are not settled in academic journals. Unless people can see broad vistas and unused resources in front of them, the belief in limited resources tends to follow as a matter of course. And if the idea is accepted that the world's resources are fixed, then each person is ultimately the enemy of every other person, and every race or nation is the enemy of every other race or nation. The end will result in tyranny, war, and genocide. Only in the universe of unlimited resources can all men be brothers. Tyranny, war, and genocide. Without the commitment to explore Mars and to have a new conceptual frontier, the inevitable result is resource competition, tyranny, war, and genocide. Again, this is an advantage that does not stem from the success of our colonization project, right? But the mere commitment to the colonization project, the mere commitment to a next frontier towards which we can strive. This frontier advantage is another one that doesn't need to be solved for by actually getting to Mars. And similarly, it's also a conceptual, discursive, performative, and ethical gesture that the affirmative can make in such a way that it transforms relationships back here on Earth and in the debate round, regardless of whether or not we successfully get to Mars. Any questions about that? Let's talk about some negative arguments that you can use against human exploration more broadly and the Moon and Mars more specifically. The first is space diseases. This is an interesting argument. In its first appearances, like way back in like the 30s and 40s, it was like when we go up there, we might catch something that's been latent on the, latent on the moon or latent on Mars. This was the theme of the first X-Files movie, if you saw it, that there was like an alien virus that was on Earth and it was buried in an ice cave.